Welcome to Lab to Launch, the new seminar series for researchers interested in pursuing entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Sarah Jane Murdoch, Administrative Project Coordinator for the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at UT Dallas, and the Operations Manager for the Venture Mentoring Service of North Texas. Joining us today is Shalini Prasad. Dr. Prasad is the director of the Biomedical Microdevices and Nanotechnology Lab, which has supported over 15 graduate researchers and over 20 undergraduate researchers over the last 7 years. Her research has been funded by federal agencies such as the National Institutes of Health and industry partners such as Sharp Microelectronics, Intel Core, Novartis, Texas Instruments, Inc., and the W.L. Gord Associates, Inc. Her work has also been reported and covered in the popular press. She's the recipient of a number of awards in the area of nanobiotechnology. She has authored or co-authored more than 100 peer-reviewed articles and about 15 book chapters, given more than 150 conference presentations and 150 talks. She holds a dozen international and US patents or provisional applications. And now here is Dr. Shalini Prasad.
Thank you very much, Sarah Jane, for that lovely introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having a good lunch period, and I'm glad you were all able to sign in and join in for this opportunity where we could chat a little bit about how is it to be an academic researcher trying to take ideas and getting them into commercial products or towards the pathway of commercialization. So as Sarah Jane mentioned, right? So I've been here at UTD now for 9 years. Prior to that, I started my career at Portland State University, Portland, Oregon. So that's where over 15 years ago, I was an assistant professor and a tenure track assistant professor. So the first thing you're told when you're a tenure track assistant professor is to figure out how to get your lab funded so that you can make it to the next level in your career, which is to achieve tenure and get promoted. And typically the strategy that's told to you and which you have to work on is doing essentially research in terms of getting federal funding, extramural research, restricted research and grants. And that's the key in terms of building up your profile. However, for me, my research mentor at that university was a gentleman who had spent over 30 years at Intel, and he had retired. And he had started off as a faculty in the applied sciences there. So when that happened, he basically talked to me and he said, look, let me help you figure out alternate sources of funding, not just what is your standard NSF, NIH, DoD funding, where you write proposals for an idea and pitch for it. So Portland is in the Pacific Northwest, and which is considered the Silicon Forest, which is where most of the manufacturing exists, right? So we had Intel, LSI Logic, Tektronix, Sharp Microelectronics, a number of these companies there. So large size players, mid-size players, small players, all of them existed. So the idea here is, what is the kind of research? He made me think about the kind of research I did. Now, for me, I'm a sensor developer. So in that context, designing sensor technologies for a host of applications came relatively naturally. So the story to connect towards making a product became more realistic in my viewpoint. Of course, we know, right, what works as a lab project, you can make it work 5 times in your lab, but to really get it to work 5 million times in that same manner, out in the environment wide open is a very different challenge of a different scale and different magnitude. But however, how do you get all these companies to invest in an idea and to support that idea? That's the first question that he made me think. And the idea here is not writing a 15-page proposal or not even writing a 6-page white paper to pitch it. The thing is to come up with primarily 3 key slides that talk about that vision and talk about how to convey that vision and the value proposition for my potential sponsor, which would be that company. So now you have to go and look for each of those companies that I was essentially planning to pitch for. What is it that they were funding in their research space? what is it that their portfolio looked like in the public space over the last 5 years that they were doing this. So of course, all these, especially a company which has got over 1,000 people, has a liaison officer, an academic liaison officer for every company. You can go and find them and you can get all this information because they're also trying to build contacts. And so you have to think about it. This was a research at what was then a research tier 3 university. So then you don't have the standard name brand that you come with this, right? So that's another challenge that you work with. But however, if you have a unique proposition for the potential sponsor, then you can make an appropriate pitch to them. So in order to get to that realization, at the university at that point of time, National Science Foundation had funded what was known as a lab to market process. So this lab to market was a funded opportunity where there was resources for pitching or supporting the knowledge of converting a lab idea into a marketable proposition for academic faculty. So there were about 50 of us, and we literally got to go to a pitch day. Today it's very well organized. Pitch days are well organized, but it was a pitch day for us. We had to go. We got a slide and we got 3 minutes. So in an academic standpoint, that could well be a thesis, right? So pretty much, it is a 3-minute thesis strategy. Similar idea. So you go there and you pitch. So I did that, and I did it for a technology whereby we could, or proposal for a technology whereby we could go and look for arteriosclerotic plaque in a very non-invasive manner without the need for complex angioplasties and so on and so forth. So that was my pitch. And today looking back, that's probably the greenest thing I've ever done, right? I had no stats to support the need for this and what the gap was. I don't think I did a very good case of articulating the gap. However, it caught the eyes of the jury who were evaluating this, and basically this got picked as one of the 6 technologies that they were going to follow through and help me with a year of understanding how to package this technology towards commercial interest for that technology. That was what the vision was. And I quickly learned that basically there are 3 pillars for all of this. You have to have a legal framework, you have to have intellectual property figured out, and you have to have the financing associated with it. So I had essentially a team, if you think my A team, so that team of people who were helping me to think through this. So I had a representative from a law firm, then some who were IP strategists, and then there was people from a venture environment. And these people were giving me advice on on how to basically prepare your presentation deck, what is the key idea that you were presenting, what was the value of your technology, potential technology. Frankly, at that point, I hadn't even done any experiments to prove out that idea, right? So that was what I got, a year of understanding. If you're going to make something meaningful for corporate interests, it cannot be about completely about just a hypothesis of an idea and proving it in your lab. It has to be something that has a value proposition with very clear, finite, timeline-based deliverables and milestones, for which, because if there is X amount of dollars invested, then the outcome of those X amount of dollars is very clearly understood. So at the end of that session or that year of learning, the next thing that happened was that to try out this, what I'd learned with, the companies in the Silicon Forest area. So I'll talk about my early interactions with Sharp Microelectronics. And so this, of course, is a semiconductor hardware company. They make televisions. We all know they're headquartered in Japan. They had a back-end research organization in Washington, the state of Washington, which is across the river, Willamette River from Portland. So it was an hour's drive. So I had prepared my slides, and I was basically, and of course, this particular project about, figuring out how to look at plaque, arteriosclerotic plaque might not be of interest to them, but I backtracked it because they were recently demonstrated interest from their liaison officer in biosensing ideas. So I went about and I looked at it. They were looking at novel material systems in that particular organization. So my pitch to them was, how may they use the novel materials that they were creating synthesizing and testing, which are primarily used back-end collectors for their television screens. So how could they use that for perhaps biosensing, right? So that was my pitch. And then, and I geographically, I made the case why I would be a better partner than University of Washington, Seattle, which was much further up, but of course had a better name recognition than where I was at. So I got $50,000 and basically 12 months to show them that if I were to use their material, I could get the levels of performance that I claimed it could by the way I looked at it. Right. So that was my idea. And that money basically helped support a graduate student and some resources. And we had a lot of, and this was my first experience at how a research contract is set up between a university and the industry. Right. So this is very important because when you do something for a company, you're not doing it as a made for hire. There is some level of intellectual property you're going to be creating as a function of this activity. So and from a company standpoint, any research dollar they invest has to impact their revenue in some manner, because ultimately research funds are coming out of the profits of the company from their regular commercial sales. So if you're thinking about it in that manner, then what you are developing at that point of time, how is that intellectual property eventually going to be of use to your sponsor, which is the company? So generally, the standard legalese in all of this is if you bring in some background intellectual property of your own, so that is owned by your organized university. So in this case, it was Portland State University. And then in the other case, whatever they were bringing in terms of the materials knowledge was owned by Sharp. And then whatever we would create would be joint, right? And there was some joint ownership which was associated with it, with some academic capabilities associated with the university, allowing us to use it for academic research. So, and this was all for $50,000. So, but the good thing is at the end of this, I was, and you had to do it in a very focused manner, focusing to the deliverables. As an academic, it's very easy to get distracted by the red herrings a certain experimental design will throw to you. So you would want to explore and understand why certain things behave in a particular manner. In this, our focus has to be exactly as if we are going on a race, right? The blinders on, and we are the horse, we can't look around, right? So we have to go for what we said our deliverable is and understanding whether we can meet it or not. So, and again, the ability to stay focused was something my mentor helped me think through, because otherwise, as a PhD student, you're always told, right? Like, go look and explore, understand why things work a particular way, quench your curiosity. It's important, but in this context, you also have to keep an eye on the timeline that you're working for and the end goal. So at the end of the first year, because we proved out the concept, I got a 5-time increment, a multiplier of 5 increment in my funding. So it went from 50,000 to 250,000, right? So, and then now you're able to ask or demonstrate certain functionality at a prototype level for that same technology, right? So, and then you were able to bring in a lot more people, and these students and these researchers were able to go and intern at this organization, at their sponsor. And then after that, the idea was you were able to develop this whole package that showed that the sensor technology could function, look, feel, see like how you proposed it to be. So once that is done, to me, my relationship with that technology as an academic ended at that point, right? Because from then on, the company took it and then they literally broke it down so that they could create alternate sets of IP to protect that ideation, the concept that I showed for them, towards being able to make a product. What eventually came out of it a few years later was a product that was able to look for allergens in the environment, which was in the Japanese and the Asian market, which is where we could see that, right? And that's basically what it was. And that's how I got to know in a public release, like anybody else, what it was. And me connecting the dots and listening later to the liaison officer gave me the knowledge as to a certain germ of what I did have that value proposition, and that's how it ended up at. So the lessons that I learned with this first experience is you have to be very focused. You have to pretty much work to your deliverables, hit your milestones, understand how IP is created and who owns what, and do not get attached to what you have created and allow for that to evolve outside of this. Know very clearly where it starts and ends. Pretty much know your lane in terms of what you have to do for that technology. But the thing is, it'll help me train a bunch of industry ready graduates. And these people were able to get jobs very easily in that manufacturing ecosystem that existed in the Pacific Northwest. So this was a big deal for me. So since then, I have moved on to multiple other academic institutions. I've spent now over 15 years in academia as an independent researcher. And so I've been now 9 years here at UT Dallas. So the value UT Dallas has versus number of other institutions I've been to, visited at, and so on, is the environment that it allows for entrepreneurship at various levels. It starts from the student level and it percolates all the way to the top, to the faculty level, right? So this is something that it's been a very conscious effort and a part multiple organizations across our campus that's helped this to happen. There's, of course, our Office of Research that has to enable a certain aspects of IP legal. Then there's the Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which provides the training and the information ecosystem that's needed for students as well as researchers if you want to engage with this. We have the Blackstone Launchpad environment. We have the Makerspace environment. So all of these are various examples, and I'm not by no means referring to everything that we have on campus, but these are examples of things that we have in our ecosystem that allows us to think towards the idea of taking academic environments to de-risk ideas and to put them out such that you can find the right partnership to commercialize. And the hope here is that if there are small businesses or large, if in this viewership, in this audience today, so truly UTD is a place whereby you can partner and build up that relationship. So I'll talk to you about a few aspects. Let's start with thinking about it as students. Since I am in the Johnson School of Engineering, it is very evident a lot of our research is very applied in nature. And our students from the very beginning are taught to solve for problems by building enabling technologies. So in bioengineering, I have seen many of our student teams, whether it is through the UT Design, the Senior Design Capstone Initiative, or outside of that, that have ideas which are solutions or interventions for multiple biomedical problems. We have had people designing smart catheters for surgeries, for endoscopies. We have had people who have looked at different surgical clippers, which can increase the ergonomic nature of how they use the functionality. We've got people who are designing devices for various kinds of therapies and so on, right? It's a wide range of things. So as students, what I have observed, and I've also encouraged student teams partnering, and in UTD, they can pitch their idea to the Blackstone Launchpad initiative. So that will allow them with some level of seed funding to get that idea tested. So now this gives them the resources to perhaps go to the makerspace and test out those ideas, right? You have to build a prototype. You have to have something physical, tangible that you can take with you if you're going to try to go and get people behind this idea and fund that idea, right? So now the great thing that the Office of Research has done is figured out the way whereby who owns this, especially if it's a student. I'm only talking about students, right? The ownership rights in terms of the intellectual property here is assigned to the student, right, under certain circumstances. Again, my caveat, my disclaimer here is I am not the Office of Technology Commercialization at UTD. Details are things that you have to work specifically with those content specialists to help you think through this. But yes, that allows you then to have the intellectual property. You have then a prototype. Now you're going to have to go and pitch this. On campus, we have a number of Shark Tank-like events that people can partner in. And then, of course, you have the Health Wildcatters, which in North Texas, which also have pitch days. And then a number of pitching events not just in Texas, not Texas, but even beyond, right? This gives you seed money anywhere from $5,000 all the way to $25,000 to $50,000, depending on what you need. It's easier when you think about maybe writing code and building a software or an app and so on. You need more money if you're trying to build a device and make a prototype of the device, whether it's 3D printing, testing, reliability, so on and so forth. So these are questions. And when you start engaging with the humans, the other aspect comes into being, which is the regulatory aspect, the aspect of ensuring the efficacy and the approval, eventual approval of the FDA, which would be needed for many of the medical devices. So, but then once you have gotten your pitch going, you've got the seed money, you've had these things, then you can use the university ecosystem, both through the Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, as well as through the Blackstone, to figure out how you can get angel funding, through the angel network, your series funding, so on and so forth. If you as the student group want to continue with, further developing the idea towards commercialization. So also when people try to start partnering, right? So you're going to try to find people to larger groups such as Capital Factory to partner with, and then they would give you the financing for a certain equity share to further proceed and move forward towards the commercialization piece. So this is if you're a student and trying to do this. Now, of course, as an academic coming at it, it's a little different. And so is it for researchers, such as your postdocs, research scientists who also work with this, who kind of think about ideation to commercialization, right? So the thing to keep in mind is, as employees of the University of Texas, Dallas, so we all are employees of the UT system, we assign our rights in our employment agreement to the UT system. So if we create ideas in our research labs, it's important for us to understand that we are assigning those rights to UT systems. So when you start engaging and partnering with startups or companies, the general idea here is that we're putting some resources in. We want to own what's coming out of it. So these partnerships have to be designed and decided well in advance before you even start engaging in. The Office of Tech Commercialization through the Office of Research has these resources. There is the industry contract manager who's there. Then there is, of course, the licensing specialist. And of course, the director of that is Brent Schultz. So you can reach out to them if they're company people here and wanting to take ideas that have been created from UTD. These would be the people that you would reach out to. So the university too maintains a list of its IP, a list of things that are available for licensing and so on and so forth. So it's important to understand what it is that you want to license from the university. And in that sense, and if you're thinking of a research project with the academic person in mind, so then this becomes the background intellectual property for that project coming in. Now, depending on the type of agreement that you have, then the forward intellectual property that's created can either be exclusively licensed to the sponsor, which would be the company, or it could well be that there are certain fields to which a sponsor would get assignments. I'll take the other example of a project that I did for 3 years here at UTD, which is with Novartis. So in that project, we were trying to demonstrate proof of feasibility for a sensor device that could look for biomarkers associated with congestive heart failure, because this would help some of the pharma drugs that the company was making in terms of converting this to a near patient device. At least this was the vision with which we started that relationship. So we spent quite some time de-risking the idea, because the intent here was that we would have to do it from a single drop of capillary blood. That's your finger prick, exactly like how a blood glucose meter would work. But we're looking for now very specific things which a particular drug would give out in the body. Right? So this is what it, and then we had to solve a lot of complex engineering complexities associated with looking for something. It's like a needle in a haystack, right? Looking for something that's really low occurring in a highly complex environment around it, right? So then we ended up creating this whole a set of intellectual property, and then the the company Novartis had the opportunity to exclusively license if they wanted. So in order to do that, they have to work with the Office of Tech Commercialization, come up with term sheets, so on and so forth. As is wont with large companies, every 3 years, their cycles change, funding changes, they lose business in certain areas, they consolidate, they restructure, they do all of this. So when that happens, the other reality when you work with the industry is that the project can get axed just like that in that quarter, because the quarterly earnings are going to drive how much in the research funding pot that they continue to keep, and then they have to prioritize based on their future forecast which research projects they will continue with or what they will freeze. So this is it's the ground reality. So while funding can be great, unlike an NIH or an NSF grant where you have the assurance that you have it for 3 years or 5 years, there is no assurance, even if the contract is there for a 3-year period, that they will close on it in that quarter. There are agreements that give protections for a few days so that people can find jobs and so on and so forth. But that's pretty much it. So this is tough, right? So, you know, it's a challenging environment, and you have to plan for that when you engage with essentially larger companies in terms of commercializing. The flip side of all of this is working, of course, with startups. Now, startups are generally cash strapped, right? So they're very lean. They want to take the money and spread it as much as possible. So when they come to an academic and they ask the academic, hey, can you show me or build me a prototype for this idea? They come to us in many ways. One of the ways is we have this idea, we have IP on this idea. We want you to come and build us a prototype using your research labs. In order to do this, we will write a collaborative grant proposal like the small business proposals, the SBIR proposals with you. So when we do this, then if there is in that very clear demarcation who gets what percentage of the money, what happens to the background IP, what happens to the foreground IP that's generated, who's bringing what into that relationship. So then you work through all of that, and then you end up with a prototype at the end of that period. And then typically you either go in for a phase 2 funding, or you go on to try to get secure private funding. So the challenge when you get, of course, federal money, which is taxpayer money, all said and done, is that the Bayh-Dole criteria comes into play, which means that if the government at any point wants to have access to that technology for human good, you would make it accessible. So sometimes this creates basically a risk in the context of certain companies, not so much in the startups, but in the larger companies, right? So they worry if you've taken federal money to develop a technology, they will never completely own it, right? Even if they buy the rights from your organization and so on and so forth. So that is another risk that you generally end up dealing with. And again, I cannot provide you an answer as how this is how it's going to be solved, but you know, there are ways and means whereby this is approached at by different companies. But going back to the startups, right? So now if a startup is got private funding all the way through, and then they're coming to the university with an idea. Now there is, especially with UT Dallas, it's the only university in Texas actually, that allows for what is known as an intellectual property assignment model, which makes it very exciting for companies to engage with academic researchers from our university. So what does that do? That allows a sponsored research project framework to be set up, which will allow the intellectual property generated through that project to get eventually assigned to the sponsor, which would be the company that's supporting the research activity. So keep in mind that if you choose to do something like that, then you have to understand as an academic the things that you're giving up, the framework at which you're functioning in that project. There is, of course, a very clear contract with specific royalty rights, so on and so forth. It's articulated in that contract, but you are giving up a lot of rights as an academic researcher to allow for that engagement to happen. I look at it as an opportunity, as a glass half full, right? Because this is a true opportunity to build a public-private partnership. Because in reality, the value of your idea is how much resources that have been spent to de-risk that idea and to take it to the level that it can truly be a product. Now, how many ever academic research grants we end up getting, it'll not take us to that point. If truly somebody is willing to take all that risk, then sure, why not? That's been at least my approach, right? So in terms of allowing that, as long as the academic freedom piece of this is retained, allowing us to publish, to put the information out in that structured manner that's articulated in the contracts. So that's important. But this is truly an opportunity because this allows, whether it's a small business or a large business, to engage with the university in a way that they can hope to own the intellectual property eventually at the end of that agreement, should one be created through that particular research contract that was set up. So this is something that I think most of us would find this very attractive as a way to pursue public-private relationships. And further build the research ecosystem. So the most important thing for faculty then becomes is finding those partners and pitching those ideas. So one thing is, there are lists of companies published. There are lists of what they do that's published. It is not as easy as looking up in grants.gov and figuring out what to apply for, which is what we typically do in research grants. And there we know very well we have to talk to program managers. We have to understand whether an idea falls within that framework of the program announcement and so on, and pitch our idea there in a standard academic funding. In these kinds of things, you have to find out what companies are looking for and how we can partner with that company or meet the company's needs, right? So the way I have found this to work very well in terms of getting people to know about what I do is I leverage social media very well, right? So we post our research, our peer-reviewed and accepted research findings out there so that lots more people get to see it. I mean, if it's in a journal, believe me, the scope, you're kind of in like an echo chamber, because people who are like you look at it, which is not helpful, because if you want money for that idea or people to fund that idea to make it a product, these are not the people who are going to do it, right? So you've got to find the right audience for your work, and the right audience for your work are outside your lane of research. So you have to get it out. So you have to be savvy about how you use social media, because that's the cheapest marketing tool that you have as an academic towards you. You have to, of course, be very careful on what you post, because you can't, certain things, if you have non-disclosures, please do not post those kinds of things. But you can use that to project to the outside world what you are capable of. Then, of course, be prepared, prepare specific short slide decks, which are your pitch decks for various ideas, and know where your research will fit in terms of who will be the commercial partners locally, perhaps in the DFW area. It can be global, you can look further down. And then it's the idea of finding the right group and pitching it to them and seeing. And keep in mind, this is not a one-time thing. Just because you made one presentation doesn't mean you're going to get any funding. It is a relationship. As with anything else, it's relationship building. It is this thing where you do multiple times and you're not even sure whether that is going to yield any outcome or not. It's just getting that word out, and you have to be very patient. I mean, we were patient when we did our PhDs. We tell our students to be patient when they get stuck in a roadblock in their PhDs. But that's the idea, right? Like, you have to be patient and you have to build that relationship. And then it depends, and whether you find the right fit, and then you can create this research. You can put this research project together, and then you have to project manage that project. You have to be very clear on the finances, and you have to be very clear on your deliverables. You cannot overshoot on any of those, because the thing you have to keep in mind, the first money that goes for all the companies when there's a downturn is going to be the money that they give for research, because that's their most expendable, their miscellaneous spending money that goes away. So sure, now today in the idea of COVID-19, this is one of the things that we would expect to see, right? That Perhaps certain companies don't have money because of the fact that the economy is on a downturn and so on. But again, this is the time where certain far-sighted companies do invest too, because this is when you can get certain ideas de-risked for low cost and gets you prepped. So there is no good time or no bad time to start doing this. It's a matter of doing this consistently, and think about it as building a relationship. So these would be probably the key ideas that I have experienced in my time frame of like being an academic in terms of how to partner with different kinds of organizations. And I'm happy to take questions and see, where this goes from here.
Yes, we actually have a lot of questions already. So we'll try to get through as many as we can. The first question is, how critical were patent grants or patent applications in raising the entrepreneurial finance?
Yes, if you don't have a patent portfolio, then you're raising money for nothing. So it's important, absolutely, to have a patent portfolio towards getting, because it's not just then a research idea, it is a research idea that has got commercial legs associated with it. Yeah.
The next question is also about patents. Does patents increase the scalability of your startup?
Okay, so I'm talking if it is an academic, right? So most people are coming to my university where my patent is assigned, or my patent application's eventual assignment is going to go, and they're going to come and look at what are the opportunities that are available with the university. That is, this is the companies looking at it, and they see against my name this set of patent applications / patents, and then the idea then becomes, yeah, we have to license it. Absolutely. Without that patent portfolio, if that company is trying to seek a venture money, you're not going to get much, because you have to show your portfolio, you have to show your coverage, and you have to show your freedom to operate to be able to raise money. Yeah.
How long did the overall process take from the idea to the execution and the implementation of the product or device?
So 3 years is the life cycle, which was the fastest I have seen for the one where you have a company with a lot of money, which was sharp, from the ideation phase to the execution. Certain things have gone to the point of prototyping at 18 months, but things have gone longer. As with the pharma company, we engaged for 3 years and then they spent another 2, so 5, and nothing ever came out of it.
How do you know who to trust with your ideas? Are there any red flags you could share?
So generally, sure. So everybody wants to convert an idea. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. I get that. I get that very well. When people come to you and say they want to take this idea and they want to commercialize it, the few things, the same thing that I was taught, right? Do these people have the finances to be able to take it and do the follow-ups to do the execution and the delivery? Who are their partners, right? Whether it is in this case manufacturing partners, financing partners, the whole ecosystem that you're going to think about. Do they have, or they do have? And again, under the NDA, whatever it is that they share with you, for you to understand that. In a sense, it's like making a movie, right? And they are the director of the movie. They have to convince me, the audience, that yes, I have to watch this movie, right? And in this case, I also have to partner with them to help them in the first piece of it to actually show proof of efficacy for them to go and further raise capital, right? So, and then if I get to know who the partners are going to be, and then I go and do research about them, try to understand whether they have they have a history. They've done this before. It's kind of like this, right? If you're going to rent a place on Airbnb, you're going to read all the reviews about it, right? So that's the same thing, very simplistically that you're doing. And our Office of Research is very helpful here. You can go back to them and say, because under the NDA, you can talk to your people, right? So this is your team. So you can ask them to help you out to see these things. And I've done this quite a few times, especially when I see international companies coming at me and really small ones that don't really have an internet presence. I don't know much about them. So this is where I and they ask them for their, I think of it as like this being a team game, a team sport, where they're helping me out to figure this
out. Why? So I'll clarify this question for those of you who aren't from UT Dallas. The question is, why Johnson and JSOM do not collaborate on those ideas more actively. So the question is, why don't the engineering school and the business school not collaborate on ideas more actively? because that could be a problem with other universities as well.
So I think that's been changing. So I've been here 9 years, right? So, and I have seen things especially change over the last 2-3 years, more so the last 2 years. So where you start seeing the cross-pollination between JSOM and ECS. In fact, the Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, right? So we have a lot of engineers taking not just the certificate courses, but also the executive MBA version of that they offer, and especially kids who are students, and I hate to use the word kids loosely, but students who are wanting to essentially take their idea into a product. And I see this a lot with the undergraduate seniors and also our graduate students. In bioengineering, I know many of our students are graduates who have taken these JSOM classes and kind of worked with those instructors. Is there anything you want to add, Sarah Jane, about the Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, like, just echoing what you said, that is sort of the purpose of the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, is to connect all of the different colleges, I mean, more specifically to UT Dallas. And also our Blackstone Launchpad contributes to that vision of connecting all of our colleges. So not just Johnson School, not just JSOM, but also ATech, Arts and Humanities, Computer Science. So we definitely actively do try to do that. Let me get to the next question here. Okay, so when the company took charge of the research after your research and they apply patent, are you on the patent as an inventor? And what other benefits can you get after the company took the work from you, besides you got the seed fund? So just referring to what you were talking about earlier.
The sharp, yeah. So yes, you have to make peace with the fact that you're going to get that research funding. That's it, and your name on as a co-inventor. That's about it. You don't get anything else. And of course, if there were some royalty agreements in the context of net sales and things of that nature, there is some money back at some later point in time. But that's basically it. And as an academic, my philosophy is I'm here to train people and put them in the workforce. So I can live with that. Not everybody can.
How can you stay? We only have a couple minutes left, so we unfortunately may not be able to get to all these questions. So the next question is, how can you stay focused on a project if you are involved in multiple projects? What advice would you give to help someone stay focused?
The team is critical, right? So you need to be able, so I'm talking of myself now as the academic handling multiple projects that's a necessity in the academic environment in which I operate in. So if I have multiple projects, then the team is critical. You cannot have cross-pollination across teams if there is specific intellectual property rules associated with the project. You absolutely cannot, because you are essentially then not being fair to your multiple sponsors. And so once you do that, you set your team, you find your team skills, and then you basically make sure that they have complementarity in terms of what they can do in their research skills or in their program management skills. And it's absolutely, you run it like a project. You have to run it like a project once you've figured out what are the key science problems you're going to solve. So the science problems is where I wear my academic hat, because that's where you have to solve it, but you have to solve it much faster. It's like solving the science problem on steroids. You have to get a solution, or you have to figure out it's failed. So it's a fail fast, right? You know it's not going to work, in which case you're minimizing the money that the sponsor is spending. So I have at some points gone back and told people like, hey, 3 months in, it's not going to work. Technically and scientifically, it cannot work because of, and I will show the data to support that. And say either we can take a different direction, or you can pull back your money and go, because you have to be honest. This is the other thing as well. So that's the only way to stay focused on multiple things, to run that team for that.
Do you own the, so you may have already answered this, but just to make sure to re-clarify, do you own the equity from the company that gave seed fund to you and took the work from you?
No, I have no
equity
in anything.
I think I think I got through all the questions. So yeah, thanks for attending, everyone. We hope to see you at our next Lab to Launch, which will be on June 15th. Our speaker for that will be Ron Pointer, discussing the ungraceful art of bootstrapping. Thank you very much.